Tom, we interrupt you there to take our viewers to Anthony Albanese, the candidate for Labor leadership, is addressing a group in Melbourne. Let's have a listen to what Mr Albanese has got to say.
Wound back. I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of country and pay my respect to their elders past and present. I thank Capita for hosting this function today. I know that you've encouraged so much long-term thinking on the progressive side of politics over the past 7 years. A political party or movement can only truly call itself progressive if it is rich in ideas, steeped in debate and full of passion about the future. I know that Bill will be speaking here, I think, next Wednesday, and that's a good thing. This contest is a really exciting one for everyone who's interested in politics and ideas. So to Per Capita today, keep up the good work. I draw my vision for our country in 4 big brush strokes. I want Australia to have a strong economy with more jobs, low unemployment and growth. I want us to be a nation of opportunity. I want us to be a nation that is environmentally sustainable, both in terms of our natural environment and our urban environment. And Australia must always be about the fair go. Have no doubt, this is not a vision that our Conservative opponents share. In office, they will hurt jobs and growth. They will limit our social mobility, damage our natural heritage and disrespect the Australian tradition of a fair go. They only got sworn in yesterday, but they've already begun. Cutbacks to infrastructure, including the NBN, undermining of the Better Schools plan, cutting funding to the Murray-Darling Basin, rolling AusAid into the Foreign Affairs Department, sacking senior public servants, and just today, the shameful act of shutting down the Climate Change Authority. Most graphically, their step back in time has been demonstrated by the appointment of just 1 woman out of 19 in the Cabinet. And then they have the hide, firstly, to express regret at what is Tony Abbott's decision and his decision alone, and then suggest that 1 out of 19 is based upon merit, as if there aren't talented women who are better than some of the blokes who are sitting in the Cabinet room. What's worse is that they've entrenched this lack of representation by appointing just 1 woman out of 12 parliamentary secretaries, thereby ensuring a lack of women at the highest levels for a political generation to come if they remain in office. These coming years are crucial. Yes, we have to expose the broken promises and bad decisions the Conservatives will commit over the next 3 years. That's our democratic duty, to hold the government to account. Yes, we have to change the way that our party manages our own affairs so that we have a deeper connection to the community that we represent. This process is a part of that. So is extending the democratic reforms into measures including policy development. But there is a bigger job, a harder job ahead of us as well. We have to generate new ideas. We're going to have to knock back some interviews and doorstops. We're going to have to pass up some opportunities to criticise and to attack. We are going to have to lift our eyes from the affairs of our own party and movement. We might even have to turn off our mobile phones for an hour. This period of opposition must be used to encourage new thinking on our side. What is the future of Australian jobs and industries as the global economy is transformed in the Asian century? How do we complete the great economic and social infrastructure we've begun in the past 5 years, like the National Broadband Network, like Disability Care Australia? And beyond that, what is there at the new horizon for government in Australia in 2016 and the years beyond? What is the next National Broadband Network? What is the next education revolution? What do we want Australia to look like in 10 and 20 years' time? Labor must always be about the practical concerns of Australians in living rooms and around the kitchen tables. It's not about us, it's about the Australian people. We must connect around these four themes that I began with: jobs and economic growth, creating opportunity, a sustainable natural and urban environment, and a fair go. A strong economy must always be a first-order issue. We need to deal with the urgent requirements of immediate concerns, but also anticipate what the future looks like. That's what good Labor governments do. We both anticipate, but in doing so, we create the future as well. Our Conservative opponents say they want a strong economy, of course, but they mean something different. We know that a strong economy is one which is creating high-skilled, high-wage jobs, which are secure in growing industries. I see an Australia in the future where everyone can say, my job is secure with decent working conditions. One where every parent can confidently say, my kids will find jobs when they grow up and their living standards will be better than mine. To achieve these objectives, we can't hide from change. I don't want to retreat from openness. Our future lies in succeeding in the world, not protecting ourselves from it. We can never just defend existing industries. We also have to reach out to new innovation and new sources of growth and jobs. There's a world of change surrounding us. The transformation of global production and demand in the Asian century has only just begun. That reaches beyond the current transition in China from investment-driven growth to a more sustainable consumption-driven growth. It reaches to the steady and irreversible rise of India, a nation whose own prospects are still there in openness and growth. Our future lies in exports. Our future lies in Asia. Our future lies to our north. Beyond the mining boom, we have to turn this into an opportunity for smart Australian exporters in every industry sector. Our own economy is already changing. Mining investment will continue to slow. Domestically, though, there'll be jobs growth in services, in health and aged care, in tourism and education, in the retail and the financial sector, in construction and transport. New jobs will be created. Small business will continue to be a major driver of job creation. I firmly believe that Labor must reach out to contractors, sole traders and other small businesses as part of a modern Labor constituency. Modern agriculture will contribute, but be driven by new technology, such as the Sensor T initiative in Tasmania using the National Broadband Network. This takes advantage of broadband technology to advise when to harvest the crop, when to pick the grape, when to farm the salmon, how to maximise productivity in the primary sector. We can do more, and we bring competitive advantages. We're a high-wage country with an advanced financial and accounting sector, a well-developed legal structure and a society that respects the rule of law. That creates export opportunities in itself, in those services and in related areas. As Infrastructure Minister, I encourage companies like Geller from Italy to base themselves in Australia as their base for regional operations. They are based in a town very close to where my father is from. We must also create opportunities for our next generation of entrepreneurs in advanced manufacturing. Be clear about this. Manufacturing has a great future in this country. That future will change, though. The future is smart, advanced, innovative Australian firms, the CSLs and the ResMeds, the digital media companies and many more. These are crucial creators of skilled work over coming decades. Companies like Thales, who are building our Defence Forces Bushmasters in Bendigo. Businesses like their Bendigo neighbours, Keach Australia. When I met with them in Bendigo, they can't wait for high-speed broadband because this will drive their export potential so that they can transmit their electronic plans and models shared with their global clients instantaneously, not on a CD that has to be posted to Kazakhstan. So many of the jobs we want our kids to do rest on their innovation, their creativity, the change and diversification that firms like that drive. Australia needs a balanced and diverse economy for the long term. We must not mortgage our national future to any one commodity or industry or export destination. And whilst I support an open economy, we must ensure that any trade agreements are truly in the national interest and make decisions not based on ideology but on hard-headed assessment. The role of government is fundamentally to make sure that the regulatory environment is right for the private sector to do its job. Productivity growth is critical. I believe I have a good record in this. When I became Transport Minister, there were 23 different transport regulators across maritime, heavy vehicle and rail. I reduced that over a number of years and after much effort through the COAG process down to 3, a single national transport regulator in each area. What that will result in is a boost to national income of $30 billion over the next 20 years by simply streamlining the absurdities of some of the regulation. My favourite, I think, was that you're allowed 66 head of cattle on the back of a heavy vehicle in Queensland and 60 in New South Wales. So I'm not sure what you do when you get to the border. Offload 6 head, I guess. But those sort of absurdities are still there today. We are a national economy. We need national leadership in these issues. Improving productivity also means investing in infrastructure and skills. Infrastructure is an area where we can either build a great competitive advantage or genuinely fall behind. It's not like our natural resources that are there. Infrastructure requires a conscious decision and government leadership. Otherwise, it doesn't happen. Or if it does happen, it can happen in a way which has seen duplicated rail lines competing against each other, which has seen some of the absurdities of the rollout in communications due to failure of previous governments. We have got those measures, I think, right during our last term of office. But we need to make sure that we continue to break the link that's there between the infrastructure investment cycle, which is by definition long-term, and the electoral cycle, which if you just have a 3-year focus, you simply won't get things done. I was the Transport Minister who completed the duplication of the Hume Highway. Done. Drive from here up to Sydney today and you don't go through a traffic light from Campbellfield to Campbelltown. We must also complete the duplication of the Pacific and transform the Bruce Highway. We must break the back of urban congestion. This is absolutely vital. And a key distinction now between Labor and the incoming government is our attitude towards public transport. We say you can't solve urban congestion without road and rail strategies, as well as having an approach to cities that recognises that you need proper planning so that people can work near where they live. This is a key distinction, and I noticed today the Napthine government speaking about the thousands of jobs, the fact that there are more than 4,000 people directly working on the regional rail link project here in Melbourne, funded with $3.225 billion of Commonwealth investment, the largest ever single Commonwealth investment in an urban public transport project, but more than 6,000 indirect jobs as well. But being silent about the fact that the incoming government rejects any funding for the absolutely necessary Melbourne Metro project, which is a precondition for doing an airport link and doing other extensions to the rail network here in this great city of Melbourne. We must also complete the national broadband network. It is absurd. It is absurd that in 2013 we are having a debate about whether fibre should be rolled out to every home or business, or whether it should be rolled out to a fridge on the corner of a street, and then last century's old copper wire, unreliable, outdated, go into the home, with everything that that represents. For those people, of course, who can afford it, they will be able to purchase the fibre network to the home under the model. I think it is a key distinction between Labor and our opponents that we regard the NBN as an essential service, as essential in this century as access to water and energy, which is why we believe it should be rolled out to every home and to every business. The development of infrastructure will call for new ways of financing, new ways of planning and new governance structures. We must build our cities but also develop the platform that we did during the last few years of a national port strategy, the national land freight strategy. It is all in place. The development of Infrastructure Australia, resisted by our political opponents so strongly, will serve Australia well. The idea that you have to look at things not in isolation but as a whole. What are the communications, transport, energy and water infrastructure needs of individual communities but of Australia as a whole? There's an absolutely critical role for the national government in our cities. If I'm elected leader, there will be a shadow minister for cities as well as a shadow minister for regional development. These tasks are complementary, as the growth of regional cities can take pressure off the major capitals, as Victoria has shown, and the former Brumby-Bracks governments led in that regard nationally. So I think this is critical and a major distinction that we need to argue our case for in the coming 3 years. That we believe essentially that our cities need to be made more productive, more sustainable and more livable, and that you can't do that in the most urbanised country on earth without having national leadership from the national government. When it comes to opportunity, education is of course the key. We can be a nation where you know that the school your child goes to has the best standards, the best teachers, the best resources, no matter what suburb or town you live in and no matter what system you choose for your child. And the work on education that Julia Gillard did will be a great legacy to her time, not just as Prime Minister, but as Education Minister as well. Where if you want to trade, you can get a training place. Where if you want to expand your small business, you can get finance and skilled staff. Where if you want to go to uni, you can get the kind of course that you want. And where you know that your work is rewarded and that you will get a fair go from your boss. One of the many legacies of the Rudd and Gillard governments is that we have done vital long-term policy development for universities and schools. The Better Schools Plan, based on the work done by David Gonski and his colleagues, and our reforms to university funding based on the work done by Denise Bradley, really do give us a blueprint for the future in these fields, grounded in careful and considered thought. Where I believe the next big agenda lies is in training. Our system today reflects a classic Australian compromise. It comprises public and private, employer, trainee and government, state and federal, and of course the engagement of teachers and trainers themselves. We don't need to simplify for its own sake, but we do desperately need more workers to have better skills and the appropriate skills. We also need to acknowledge that the hiving off of the most profitable areas of training has placed real pressure on the TAFE system. Skills are the vital element in getting unemployment down and workforce participation up. This is an area of the highest priority and Labor must use this period to develop a very clear distinction between us and the current government and a way forward. A commitment to a strong economy and creating opportunity must also be sustainable. This isn't an add-on. An essential component of economic growth must be sustainability. There are significant economic opportunities in investing in clean energy and decoupling economic growth from emissions growth. To not do so is to risk an expensive and sudden economic transition in decades to come. Australia must keep to a market-based system to cut our carbon pollution at the lowest cost and to create new opportunities. This is an important opportunity for us also to make the political point that I've made before today and I'll continue to make during this campaign and beyond. That Labor must not be about tactics. We must not be about the 24-hour cycle. We have to actually be about the vision going forward and what we stand for. And if that sometimes is uncomfortable and we've got to argue our case, well, so be it. I'm up for it, and I believe the entire Labor movement and Labor supporters expect us to be up for it as well. I see a future where every industry and every government is investing in a clean energy future, where we are building low carbon and no carbon power, smart grids and distributed cogeneration, and where we export clean energy and clean technology to the world. Too often in the past it's been great Australian breakthroughs in solar energy, in cogeneration, that have then been commercialised and taken up and value added to by international markets. Australia hasn't got the benefit of it. We need to make sure that we benefit as a national economy at the same time as we're benefiting the world. We have the plan. Labor's task in the next 3 years is to fight for it like there's no tomorrow. If we don't, there might not be one. Climate change is a global challenge and we must play our part. And I predict that the debate will change. Tony Abbott, if he goes to a forum of the G20 or the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change or to the UN and stands up and says what he thinks, that climate change is crap, as he has described it, will be a national embarrassment, but it will, I believe, change the dynamic here, because the Australian government will have to engage on the basis of the science, not just on the basis of three-word slogans. Part of being Australian is a commitment to the fair go. Labor governments are at our best when we take on inequality and discrimination, whether it be gender, ethnicity, age, religion, disability, or who people happen to love. That means the federal parliament should legislate for marriage equality. Marriage equality will happen, and when it does, people will wonder what the fuss was about. No one will lose any existing rights. What will happen is that people who currently don't enjoy the right will have it. And for those who believe that marriage is an important institution that brings stability, then I can't see what the argument is against it. For our vision of the nation in 10 years' time and beyond, there are new grounds of fairness beyond that which are most prominent at the moment in the debate, which we must secure. In the coming decades, I believe how we treat older Australians is going to be vital for the future of fairness. Millions of Australians will want security and freedom in their retirement years. That means adequate retirement income, A good life in retirement, something Labor has worked so hard for. With 2 decades of universal superannuation now behind us, a full-time worker on a medium wage can retire today with a super balance of around about $130,000. We can project more than that though. In another 20 years, people retiring will have a full working life of super behind them. And a full-time worker on a medium wage will retire with a balance of $340,000 in today's money. This is a stunning achievement, and it shows what can be done by a Labor government with a long-term vision. It is extraordinary, and we must resist also the opposition's attacks that they will make on the low-income super contribution as being short-sighted, not only not in the interests of those low-income workers, but not in the national interests either. These are decisions made in government 25 years ago to create universal superannuation, which will be bearing new fruit in 25 years' time. Those kinds of long-term decisions lie ahead of us in the next decade as well. Making sure that older Australians aren't discriminated against is going to be vital to creating the opportunity for millions of healthy, educated Australians to continue to contribute to our society. Consider this. Deloitte has found that an increase of 5% in paid employment by Australians over the age of 55 would result in a $48 billion boost to our GDP, a lift of some 2.4% in national income. Or think about it this way. 5 years ago, there were 5 working-age Australians to every 1 Australian over 65. But in 40 years' time, there'll be just 3 working-age Australians to every 1 Australian over the age of 65. That change is familiar to us, even if the scale is still amazing. But think about those over 65s, who those over 65s are going to be. They'll be the people who are starting in the workforce this year, the best educated, the best trained, the healthiest generation of Australians ever. If those Australians who want to participate but are excluded from the workforce because too many employers are allergic to hiring white hair or are too inflexible to create the kind of job that fits an older worker, we are not serving their interest or the national interest. This is just one of the debates about the nature of work that we have to have, the need for more flexible work, the impact that telework will have, not just in terms of changing the nature of work, but the impact that teleworking has on reducing urban congestion and changing the nature, the spatial challenge that has been so significant in Australia's economic development. I think these challenges are exciting. They present an opportunity for innovative policy development. And today I've outlined a framework for Labor, jobs and economic growth, creating opportunity, sustainability and a fair go. Not 3-word slogans where it just ends with the slogan, but a framework for debate beneath which can go substantial debate. Because Labor is different from our opponents. We're marked harder, even by, or particularly by, our own supporters. We must always be prepared to engage in that debate. This process of democratic input into the leadership must evolve into democratic input into policy development. This must respect a broad range of progressive opinion whilst articulating common core principles. We need to open up, including to think tanks and organisations like Capita, which is why I wanted to give this contribution here today. Labor will always not just have one view, and there's nothing wrong with different views and discussion being held, as long as it's held with respect. It far beats having discussion just about personalities. It's more difficult to build a coalition based upon a positive agenda than a coalition based upon negative slogans. But it's necessary nonetheless. Because Labor governments are about progressive change, not just entrenching existing economic and power relationships. We will benefit from embracing this change. Our capacity to mobilise support for Labor will be enhanced by the process itself. And I'm standing for the leadership because I believe that I'll bring to that position vision, unity and strength. Labor in opposition needs to focus on ensuring that at the time of the next election we have a coherent and clearly articulated alternative vision for the nation. If that means not worrying about the 24-hour media cycle, so be it. We must always remember that the election of a Labor government is not the end in itself. It is what Labor governments do to benefit Australia and our people. It is only Labor that's taken on the big reforms. The age pension, nation-building infrastructure from the Transcontinental Railway to the Snowy Mountain Scheme to the National Broadband Network, Medicare, compulsory superannuation, access to higher education. We have a big challenge. Labor must change and we must do better. But if we harness the ability of all our caucus team, our existing members, but importantly our potential members as well as our supporters, we will maximise our opportunity to achieve government in 2016. When we do this, we can build on the legacy of the major reforms of the Rudd and Gillard governments. But we can also develop the next wave of reforms to make Australia a more prosperous, just and sustainable society into the future. I thank you for your attention today.
Albo, thank you for those broad brushstrokes, examples of policy detail and, most importantly, the reasons why we should debate and the reasons why progressives should stand for future change. We've got a good chance for a good 20 minutes of questions. There's a roving mic, so I'll start down the front where we can hear you, and then the roving mic, while the question's been answered, if you could put your hand up, I'll have a sneaky point to the next one so we can get the roving mic to you. Down the front there in the brown jacket, please. And
As a life member of the ALP, I was very pleased to hear many of the good, positive things you said, but also as a life member of the party and someone who reluctantly handed out cards on election day, I'm concerned about perhaps the more difficult issues of civil liberties, privacy, asylum seekers, which do tax the concerns and issues and worries of party members and people who found they could no longer support the ALP. I realise we're going to be very strong, or I hope we'll be very strong on thwarting the development of the Australian Building Commission with its attacks on civil liberties in the way it was presented before. But I'm very worried about what the development of the internet and the National Broadband Network will do to the secrecy and privacy of people who are using that service, because they do seem to be under growing attack. The attacks on Facebook too, what information they have, those sorts of things that are out there on the internet coming to us through the broadband network, but are attacks on our civil liberties. Comments on those, thank you.
There's a fair bit there. Can I say that, but thank you for the contribution. Can I say in terms of, I'll sort of work backwards perhaps, I'll try and keep it brief. With regard to the internet and these issues, I think that new technology basically does advance us. I'm a huge supporter of the National Broadband Network. I think that, however, it is true that when new technology moves forward, it's appropriate that there be a debate about these issues. And I do think we need as a society to have a debate about the impact of social media, about the impact of new technology, how it impacts on our lives. And I think politicians can play a role in that, but the community can play a role as well. There's a great episode of Modern Family where they're sitting around the kitchen and they're texting each other rather than talking to each other. It's a real issue. It's a real issue for young people. Getting, you know, I've got a boy who started high school this year, and there's a debate amongst our sort of parents and friends about, you know, what sort of hours kids should have access to screen time. And all of those issues, I think, are really important. We, as a society, there's enormous opportunity for information sharing. I think one of the reasons why the democratic reforms are sweeping through the party in terms of this election is that people demand more direct say because they have more information. Previously, they had to go to a hall in Brunswick or what have you once a month, and they got their written notice and they went along and they got the report and they took some notes and they saw the minutes of the meeting. The world's different now. People demand different access. If we're going to open up the party, we need to open up, in my view, use new technology to engage people in real policy participation. During this process, there's going to be town hall virtual meetings, so that people can participate without having to fly all around the country. I think that's important as well. With regard to asylum seekers, if I start there, that'll open up a very long debate. I understand there's some disappointment with the positions that we took. Can I say, though, because I want to be honest with people, that there aren't easy solutions. There aren't easy solutions. And, you know, if there was, we would have done them. And the position whereby more than 1,000 people were coming by boat every week and people were drowning was unsustainable. So I believe very clearly that people should be treated compassionately and treated with dignity as human beings. At the same time, however, the policy did need some shifting, and I know that might win me a couple of votes in terms of the exercise, but I do have to be honest and say that all of us had a great deal of difficulty grappling with what is a very complex question.
Hi Albo, my name is Rosalind Spencer. I'm a transgender post, but my birth certificate is male. My name on the birth certificate is Rosalind Spencer. I would be considered by law as an indeterminate sex, like the intersect, and I'm just wondering, when it comes to same-sex marriages, will you actually put in the indeterminate sex as well? Because at the moment I can't mail either a male or a female. And secondly, to just add on to that, will you in the future consider of having a non-conscious vote on that issue in Parliament?
I support the conscience vote. It's one of the areas where I've changed my view over a period of time in terms of conscience votes. I used to argue that, you know, we're a political party. I think in 2013, if we're going to be inclusive and open up, you can't say to people who genuinely have a difference of opinion that's held for reasons of their religion, their belief, whether I agree with it or not, I think it's a matter of respecting it. So I support a conscience vote on issues such as that. With regard to complexities of the policies that you put forward, I don't want to in the spirit of saying we need to not respond in the 24-hour cycle, we need to also not make policy pronouncements on the run. I certainly believe, of course, that every individual is entitled to proper treatment and respect. So that's my starting point, but with regard to specifics, I'd have to look at exactly what the circumstances were.
Where's the microphone? Microphone's down there. We've got paper waving halfway up the back on the left that's been waving for some time. And further to some of the people in the audience who are more disciplined than I am, question in quick terms, please, without too much specific policy gotchas.
At least I got your attention, moderator. My name is Oscar Lobo. I'm a deputy mayor in Glen Ira City Council and a first Indo-Portuguese migrant. Honourable Anthony Albanese, I would like to ask you one question and one question only because of dearth of time. You mentioned 3 times about unemployment. you were down in history for cancelling the enterprise agreement. Your government has brought in 457 visa and depriving people in Victoria and Australia of their jobs. You're bringing accountants from India
again,
and other places. Can you please tell us and assure us that there will be jobs and that the jobs will not go to India? Thank you.
Well, one of the, I think indeed the last piece of legislation that we got through in June was about 457s. 457s, the legislation was not about stopping the use of 457s. There are times where it is appropriate. We have always relied upon migrant labour as a country. What it was about, though, was ensuring that there needed to be a process to see if Australian workers were available first, and there needed to be a demonstration of that, and a demonstration also about training of Australian workers. So you simply didn't just fall back into a situation of relying upon 457s as the mainstay of the Australian migration system. So I think it's a matter of getting the balance right, making sure that we provide opportunities for young people in terms of training. Part of what I'm talking about in terms of the skills policy is making sure that we have a program whereby we can look at what are the jobs that will be required in 5, 10, 15 years' time. How do we ensure that TAFE, that's currently under such enormous pressure from cutbacks from Conservative governments, but also due to some of the competitive processes that have occurred, which have meant that some of the more profitable bits have been hived off. How do we deal with those issues?
You need to also make sure...
There's one question. Thank you. We can't engage in conversations. Just in the blue sweater in front of you, Emily, just right there. Next one forward. There you go.
Hi, Albo. I'm Jim Hyde, former colleague of yours in the ministerial field. I want to take your mind back to, invite you to go back to the last lot of great reforms prior to Prime Minister Gillard's set of reforms, and that was when Prime Minister Keating was trying to foist on us a leadership-led GST. And we actually used a really good process of opening the party up to non-members as well as members in policy debate forums that actually took that process on, and we got rid of option C, as you will remember. And I want to know whether you are prepared to go down that process again of opening up to people that are not in the party, who are sympathisers and have a lot to actually offer to the progressive side of politics.
I'm here. This is a demonstration of it. I think we've got to engage, and there's a whole range of people, for whatever reason, won't join a political party. But they're progressive, they have ideas, they want to make a contribution, and that's why Per Capita and other similar organisations have such an absolutely critical role to play. I want us to be open about those ideas. One of the things that I did as a minister and a shadow minister, when I was Environment Shadow Minister, I set up a group that included a whole range of people who weren't in the Labor Party, from the environment movement, people involved in urban sustainability as well, and had that input. And it was very positive, and people were willing to participate. Similarly, in terms of when I was the aged care shadow. In government, I produced the National Urban Policy and then established a National Urban Policy Forum with groups like the Property Council and others who weren't Labor's natural allies. I think one of the things that we've got to do is not be frightened of having a debate. Some people have said to me, why have you gone on Andrew Bolt? Well, I go on Andrew Bolt, and I did it 3 times because some people happen to watch Andrew Bolt. And we cannot afford to say, no, we don't agree with you, we're not going to talk to you. We can't do that. We as a movement have to be prepared to engage with the business community, with small business, with people who don't agree with us, each and every day, and argue our case. If we're confident in our case, we have nothing to fear from debate.
just to concur on that, this is an open forum. The invitation has gone out broadly to our network, which is independent of the ALP. It's been retweeted. The ALP has emailed it out. The media here. It's a perfectly open forum, and we hope from these sorts of interfaces between internal party processes and progressive debates around ideas that a much better set of solutions for long-term future can come. So that certainly is in line with our mandate in hosting these sorts of forums. Another question, please. Just in front of you, right there in the brown jacket.
Thanks, Albo. Max Dumay. I embrace, and I can't question any of your vision, but if Bill comes and gives the same vision next week, what's your edge?
I'll be giving my pitch, I think it's 6 o'clock tonight. Where are we? Tuscan? To Labor Party members. I deliberately tried to stay away from just giving a sort of crude pitch for votes here. But have a look at the themes. Vision, unity, strength. I think I'm someone who, there's some people here like John, and there's people I've known for a long time in this hall. People like Dennis Glover I've known for much more than, much longer than we didn't know each other, since we were about 17 or 18, I think. And that was a long time ago. In terms of the processes, I never saw myself as a Labor leader. I didn't go into Parliament. There's no journalist, I said at my press conference, there's no journalist who can say that I ever said to him, what do you think my chances of being Labor leader one day are? I saw myself as a team player who would make a contribution to the team. I did want to be Leader of the House. I think I have particular skills on the floor of the Parliament that I've demonstrated, I think, in the most difficult Parliament that Australia has seen. 596 pieces of legislation. It helped that we had a fantastic negotiator as Prime Minister in Julia Gillard. But each and every day, if you want to think about a challenge, it's waking up and knowing you've got to get Bob Katter and Adam Bandt to vote for the same thing. And what occurred in terms of that process, I think I exhibited some capacities there, and I found myself as Deputy Prime Minister, Minister for Infrastructure and Transport, Minister for Broadband Communications and the Digital Economy, Leader of the House of Representatives in a minority parliament, and the member for Greenlaw. I reckon Leader of the Opposition's a lot easier than that sort of task. Of course it isn't easy, it'll be a big challenge, but you know, I had circumstances whereby, you know, around the election campaign, people approached me, people encouraged me, not just in the party and the caucus, but in the community, in the business community. And I think this process is very important. So I'm having a crack. And no one's ever given me a leg up in life, so I don't mind being engaged in a process at all. I think it's an important process. If I didn't think I was the best candidate to lead Labor and maximise our vote at the next election and potentially win the next election, I wouldn't be a candidate.
I just had an apparition, perhaps, that Bob Katter, Adam Bandt and Andrew Bolt were somewhere in the standing room only. If they are here, firstly, they would be welcome. Secondly, step forward and ask a question. It's an open house. We've got time for one more and then we better wind it up. In the red sweater in the middle here, Emily.
Thank you. Anthony, how do you see the future of the relationship between the union movement and the political party?
Sorry, there was confusion, so I was looking there and the voice is coming.
That's okay, I'm here.
Yeah, go.
What's your view of the future between the industrial and political wings of the Labor movement?
I think that no connection to the union movement, you don't have a Labor Party. That doesn't mean that the party structures shouldn't be the subject of debate and shouldn't change. The truth is, at the moment, the problem is that there isn't enough participation of trade union members in the Labor Party. There's not enough participation. There's not enough participation of small business owners, of contractors, of people who are pensioners, of people who are young students. We need greater participation. So I think the debate often gets caught up in asking the wrong questions. The question is, how do we create a mass-based party, which we are not, and parties that do not change are like, I've used the analogy of a bowling club that doesn't change. The bowling clubs around our cities that don't change, that still do things the same way, that have the same people, that rely upon the same events, they're the ones that are closed. The ones that are thriving are those who open up to new ideas, who open up to new people, who are prepared to change the way that they've operated, as difficult as it might be it your barefoot bowls or your disco bowls or whatever. Who cares? The ideas will come up from the community if the community has ownership of it. I went to a fantastic club with Kath Botel during the campaign at just down the road here. No, it was Fitzroy. I should know, it's the Lion. It was on the thing. I'm a member now. I must declare that. That was a club that clearly is opening up to people and is therefore able to grow. The Labor Party must open up if we are going to grow. We cannot continue to say we want the same people, doing the same things. And that's why this process, hell of a lot better than a few blokes sitting in a room deciding who the leader's going to be.
Albo, thank you very much for sharing what you've shared with us today. I'd like to know if you, as leader, or in fact not as leader, you throw your full support in ensuring we reach the affirmative action 40% rule for women in the party to be pre-selected, that is, women candidates to be pre-selected in winnable seats. We're not there. We were supposed to be there by 2012, and we've taken great joy and apprehension from what Abbott has done with his cabinet, but we must continue. Will you support the 40% rule, whether you're a leader or whether you're not? Thank you.
Thank you. 2 points. The first is that you get to be Deputy Prime Minister, you think you might change the title of you. Now what's happened, I'm not quite sure how it's happened, but everyone now just calls me Albo. It's just very, very odd. People yell out across the street. In terms of the processes, I say look at my record, where I have a sphere of influence, which I do. In my federal seat at the time of the last New South Wales state election, there were 5 seats, state seats wholly or in part in the electorate of Greenlaw. There were 5 ministers in the Keneally government.